Hello, and welcome to my project, The Legend of Ivthrex. This game was inspired by Legendary, a forgotten FPS game from 2008. When I played this game a few years ago, I thought it had a really cool concept, but it ultimately underwhelmed in its execution. So for this project, I wanted to try and do my own version of it and see if I could improve the problems that were with this older version of the game. So, I started out by thinking about what I could do in terms of a narrative. Legend of Ivthrex is a very simple story. You are sent in to destroy a cult who worship this big evil griffin god known as Ivthrex. And basically you have to go there and shoot a bunch of cultists and fight a big griffin. It's a very, very simple plot, but I think it works quite effectively for what the game's trying to be, which is a sort of cheesy 90s FPS style of action. The game itself has 3 weapons, a shotgun, an assault rifle, and a railgun. The shotgun is the first that you unlock, which you have right at the very beginning of the game, but the other 2 you have to wait until later in the game. The assault rifle can be picked up either from a secret or near the end of the game where you have a big boss battle. The railgun is actually in a set position where you have to pick it up in order to shoot a button in order to progress into the level itself. The shotgun itself is mostly effective at close range, whereas things like the assault rifle and the railgun are better for mid to far range against enemies. In the game currently, there is 3 types of enemy. There is the cultists, which will usually fire fireballs at you from a small distance away. There's the badgers, which is kind of similar to like a dog goblin sort of thing, which will attack you via a melee attack. And there is Ivthrex. Ivthrex himself is a big boss battle that appears at the end of the game. He has 3 different attacks. He can either swipe at you with his claws, he can shoot lightning, and he also has fireballs, similar to cultists themselves. He also has a lot more health than the other enemies, which makes him quite a big threat near the end of the game. A major focus of Legend of Ivthrex for me was the level design. So I'm going to go quickly through some of my favourite elements of the way that the game itself is designed. So right at the very beginning of the game, you're immediately attacked by these 4 cultists which throw fireballs at you. This is to teach the player that moving around quickly is a major priority. The whole rule of this game is to never stop moving. So as players fight these first 2 enemies, they'll quickly get hands on the controls and how to move around. Whilst doing this, I'll also likely find some of the secrets which are scattered around the levels. So the reason I wanted to have so many secrets is again to go back to this 90s style of design, but also to encourage exploration. These secrets usually have hidden items and things which can be used by the players themselves. So for example, you can find things such as extra armor, health, and mana. Health is pretty much self-explanatory in terms of what it does. It's basically how much damage you can take before you die. Armor works in a similar sort of way. It protects your health from taking damage, although it does degrade much quicker than health. Mana is quite an interesting one. So, in Legend of Ivthrex, you have these different powers which you can actually utilise. My personal favourite of these would be the Time Warp ability, which allows you to slow down time, similar to Max Payne's bullet time from the games of the same name. You also have the ability to speed yourself up and run really quickly. You've got the ability to flap your wings, basically, which you have on your boots, which allow you to fly a short distance. And you were at one point going to have a hypnosis ability, although that has since been removed due to it being way too overpowered, and also causing several major bugs and glitches. The powers themselves are activated using this weapon wheel, which I think works pretty well and efficiently. The system itself was kind of inspired by Requiem of a New Angel, although it has received major modifications since that original version. In terms of the level design, getting back to it, you'll notice that in this room that I'm showing now, you can actually jump across these different statues and things. So the whole idea of this room is it will teach the player how to move around. So they can jump across the statue and they can slide under the other statues in front of them. And this teaches them they can jump, slide, and run around. In the next room you can see there is a big statue which is actually in the centre, which acts as a midpoint for this part of the level. So players know that they can use this as like a central idea, almost like a compass, to know exactly where they are at all times. There's also a button on the wall in order to open the door, and this teaches the player that in order to progress they need to press buttons. You'll notice above the door is a red light which turns to green when the door is open, so this again reinforces that the player has to basically unlock these different doors. In the next room, the player will have their first encounter with some badgesses, and I feel that this works quite well because you've got plenty of space to move around, to avoid being attacked, and you basically avoid taking damage. It gives them that bit of freedom to move around and get to understand how the mechanics work. As they go into the room, they'll also be forced to see the the button behind a glass pane. So by going into this area, they'll be able to see where they need to go. The door itself is locked, so they'll need to crawl through the vent and shoot out the actual vent cover in order to get to this room. This works better than just having them going to the room itself through the door, because it adds a bit more interesting movement. Although they can leave through the door because there's a button on the other side which they can press in order to escape, which speeds up the process so they don't need to go all the way through the vents again. In the next room after this, you'll see that there is these L-shaped style of platforms which will guide the player's eyes to where they need to go. There are also these souls which are being fired in the direction, which will drag the player's eyes towards where there is this button which they need to shoot. Once they shoot this button, it'll actually open up another, not only the door that they need to go through, but a second part of the wall, which will flood cultists into the room itself. This means that players will have to have a little fight here, and they'll also have an elevated position where they'll be able to test out their new weapons, such as the railgun and the assault rifle, if they found it from the secret within this room. Another secret that I quite enjoy is this area which I'm also showcasing, where players have to shoot these explosive barrels to destroy the walls. There's a few points in the game where they'll need to do this. First of which, the explosive barrel is already within the wall, is already by the wall itself, and the other being one where the players have to pick up the explosive barrel and take it to the wall in order to utilize it. So this will act as basically a tutorial and also a basic reward for them working out what they need to do in this point. As the player progresses on, they'll also notice that there is this set piece, as they go through the once locked door, they'll see a griffin fly by, which teases the idea that Ivthrex is coming by. They'll go down the staircase, and as they're going down, they'll see a vent cover. When they look at this vent cover, they'll say, "Oh, hang on a minute, because I've seen this vent cover before, I know there's a hidden area here," and they'll be able to pick up some extra items. As they go down into this elevator, they'll actually end up in this other area where they can see there is another lift that they need to get into, but it's locked. So they'll continue down the pathway, and as they continue down it, they'll see there are these glass panels on the floor, and below them there seem to be these same soul things, which both guide the player in the direction they need to go, and it also hints at something upcoming later on. Getting into the next room, they'll see there is this turret which is shooting in them, and they need to use this turret and they need to use their slowdown ability in order to use this. This is hinted at by the text on screen, which says "Time is on my side." The reason for this being implemented is because players weren't utilising the power systems enough, and this is a good way of teaching them how to use it. So once they've managed to get around to and avoid being shot by the turret, they'll be able to get to this button which is behind it, press it, and that will shut the turret down and also open the door they need to get to. As they try to get to the exit, however, the door itself will shut and they'll be forced to go through the vents. There are two ways they can go. One of which allows them to go through the vents in order to get to a secret area, which just gives them some extra ammo and also some extra mana, and the other allows them to get back to where those souls were being fired beforehand. They'll be able to crawl through, shoot another vent cover off, and then they'll finally be able to get into the area they need to go. At the end of this part, they'll get into a lift, which they'll hear the sound of something above them. It's creaking, and they'll see text appear on screen. The cable has been cut as it starts to fall. As they're falling, they'll escape into the boss arena, and they'll be forced to fight both Ivthrex, Badgesses, and cultists all at the same time. In this area, there's also jump pads which they can use to bounce around, which add verticality to the environment and just are incredibly fun to use. You can actually notice these bounce pads by the fact that they're flashing different colours in order to symbolise that players can touch them and mess around with these in order to jump around. After defeating Ivthrex, you'll end up getting sent to this other location, basically being teleported to this other map. At this other map, they start in a cave which has a blue light to it, and as they go through, they'll start to hear Ivthrex talk. He'll start to say certain voice lines like "Welcome to Etoite," hinting towards where your location is. And as you get through the actual through the cave itself, you'll open out into this big open area with a big set piece at the end. With this, and you'll hear Ivthrex talking about basically this world and how it's his. Then the game comes to an end. You'll see the credits, and you'll get a post-credit scene. That's basically how the level itself plays out. I'm really happy with how this game came out. I do think it does a lot of things to improve upon the base ideas of Legendary, but doing them in their own unique way, and also just being generally a lot more fast-paced and a lot more interesting in terms of the movement and the combat. One thing I do wish that I had the opportunity to do would be to make multiple levels, or possibly polish up this one more visually, because the actual level itself is mostly just a grey box level of that players can go through. Now, it's incredibly fun, but I do think that it would have been nice to see a little more, because I had a ton of ideas that I really wanted to incorporate within this game itself. So that may be something I can possibly look to do in the future. I do think that some of my favourite elements of this game are probably the level design, because I do think it is very fluid and easy to move around. And I also love the visual spectacle of the end as well, how it feels very different to everywhere else because it's meant to be this other world, and it gives this really sort of dark atmosphere as well, giving you an idea that this is a big open area that has a lot of mystery to it. But overall, I do think Legend of Ivthrex has been very successful as a project. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.